Special thanks to Sharita Soper for providing us with today's MSM Draw. Submit a drawing prompt with the hashtag MSM Draw in this video for a chance for it to be drawn in the next one. My condolences, Ultimate Creator Eric, as it's been less than a year and your creation is already subject to the cold steel of science. I mean, what? Welcome back to the lab! I have no idea how many Monster Biology episodes are left because we got so off track, so I'm just vibing and making as many episodes as I want. So let's kick off today with our live segment, then get started.
Spin the wheel. Mythicals. How topical, because we have Bazinga now. Alright, we're ready to go. The question mark represents the unknown Dreamythical so far, but we're probably not going to roll him. I'm so sorry, Trouble.
We have quite a puzzling creature sitting before us now. There's so many intricate anatomical features that the Trouble possesses, and it was a real treat to work them out. Seeming how popular this mythical monster is, I hope you can enjoy this study of its internal workings. Well, that didn't sound personable at all. We'll start by examining the angelic face of the Trouble, and immediately come across a concerning anatomical feature. Where's its mouth? You may think that it's located in an area underneath its head, out of sight, like an aquatic snail. They have a downturned mouth that passes over flat surfaces like a vacuum, which I find very cute. I have a pet apple snail that does this, and he's like a little Roomba. Getting back on topic, I can confirm that the Trouble, in fact, does not have a mouth like that. Instead, Ultimate Creator Eric actually let us know how this mythical monster eats. He said that the Trouble eats like a Waddle Dee from Kirby. And we can see exactly how from this clip of the official Kirby Right Back At Ya cartoon. Hi everyone, this is Editing Creeptanium, and to prevent copyright claims, I will be doing the sound effects. Here, see if I'll eat this cookie. What? Huh? No way! He absorbed the cookie. The Waddle Dee just straight up phased the cookie into his mouth. How could the Trouble be capable of doing this? How on earth is this actually physically possible? Well, this phenomenon is already on display in the animal kingdom. Cucumber. Or should I say, sea cucumbers. These marine invertebrates are echinoderms, meaning that they're somehow related to starfish and urchins. It sort of looks like you cross an eclair with... Let's not finish that thought. These animals may not look like they sport any interesting features, but I'm sure some of you know that there's more to this creature than meets the eye. Sea cucumbers are composed of a special type of flesh called ketch connective tissue. It's mainly composed of interwoven collagen fibers that are able to tighten and loosen as per the cucumber's request. When the fibers are tightened, the sea cucumber becomes very tough and chewy, almost stone-like. When the fibers are loosened, the animal is very squishy and water-like. You are able to poke a hole into the side of a sea cucumber with your finger, it gets so soft. This feature allows the sea cucumber to loosen the connections in its internal organs and spew them out into the ocean to distract predators. This unique tissue makes the sea cucumber a unique and fascinating member of the ocean, and this short segment honestly doesn't do it justice. And don't even get me started on the fish in its anus. That's a topic for you to research, if you dare. Applying this to Trouble, we can posit that the monster has ketch connective tissue as well. When it wants to eat some food, it just gets all squishy and pushes the food into its mouth, which is hidden by a membrane of skin. Echinoderms are famously regenerative, so any sort of post-dinner crevice in the face of the Trouble is quickly healed over. However, once the food is inside the mouth, the Trouble begins to eat it by means of a radula. Imagine if your tongue was rough like a cat's. Now imagine trying to eat a hamburger by only licking it with that tongue. This is what lunchtime looks to a gastropod. It has a tongue covered in ridges, called a radula, that it scrapes along food. Similarly to its real-world cousins, the cherubble would have a radula too, because it doesn't make sense for a sea slug to have jaws. Some snails have a drill-like radula to take a chunk out of other soft-bodied animals with it. Unfortunately, I was on the receiving end of one of those attacks, and have since given a wild snail a taste for human flesh. At any rate, we can take a little time to talk about what type of skeletal system the cherubble would have. With no bones and no exoskeleton, how does it move around? Well, say hello to the hydrostatic skeleton, which gives support to soft-bodied organisms by means of water pressure. Animals with this type of body support often possess a large bladder filled with fluid, or use pneumatically operated muscles to sort of squirm around. Notable examples include the earthworm and the starfish. So in theory, you could hold the cherubble, gently squeeze the cherubble, and spike the cherubble into the floor, and it should be perfectly fine and squishy. The cherubble also possesses quite a few sensory organs as well. It has what looks like ears on the top of its head. This brings to mind the adorable sea bunny, which also has little protrusions like that. However, they're not used as ears, but more like a pair of nostrils. Those are called rhinophores, which pick up chemical scents in the water. The bio does classify them as rhinophores, with a special twist. They're also able to project parts of its dreams onto reality, meaning that those organs are the conduit for three-dimensional dreams to spring from. Now, I get it. I can hear you saying, "Oh, Creeptanium, dreams aren't real. How will you explain this?" The simple answer? Group psychosis! I am desperately ignoring any sort of magical implications that this monster might bring to the table, simply because I think it's fun to try to create a scientifically grounded theory. That being said, I don't think the cherubble actually uses its rhinophores to project dreams into reality. Instead, I think it simply affects the brains of itself and others around it to hallucinate and see stuff that isn't really there. Its rhinophores not only take in chemicals, but also release them in the form of hallucinogenic pheromones. We have no confirmation that monsters all see the same dream at the same time, but if we ever get a confirmation along those lines, this is how I would explain it. Your brain is made of electrical signals and chemical messages. The cherubble might somehow encode its own neural patterns into physical chemical compounds. Perhaps the orientation and order of the molecules dictate the specific emotion or the vibe of the dream. When the chemical is synthesized and radiates out through the rhinophores, other monsters can breathe it in and experience the same stuff the cherubble is currently dreaming of. Therefore, because the monster is so neurologically advanced, it would need a large brain to create that many compounds. Additionally, the bio confirms that the cherubble can hear, so maybe those rhinophores also count as actual ears. One last thing to note is the curlicue of flesh on the cherubble's forehead. I think it serves a higher purpose than being a simple decoration. I propose that the spiral is some sort of cephalic head tentacle that is sensitive to touch, water pressure, and vibration. Many gastropods have this, although it usually is in the form of mustache tentacles. Another fascinating anatomical feature of sea slugs and nudibranchs are the gills, which usually surround the anus. Simply put, the cherubble is usually the one who dealt it. There are actually two different shapes that we can see on the back of the monster. The first are those small, round, flat-looking ones. Those are the actual gills that the cherubble would use to respirate through while it is underwater. The gills would have lots of capillaries near the surface of the flat wedge of tissue in order to most effectively facilitate the exchange of carbon dioxide for oxygen. That makes sense for living on the seafloor in a coral reef, but what about when the cherubble ventures out onto dry land? Well, that's when we can take a page out of the book of the frog. Most of these amphibians can breathe in water and out of water, thanks to their lungs, as well as perpetually moist skin. Because they have thin and porous skin, oxygen is able to get right in there and enter the bloodstream, no breathing inwards required. That is also what the Cherubble does to survive on land, meaning that it has quite a few mucus glands all over its body. This also means that the Cherubble is always slimy to the touch, in case you wanted to imagine what it would be like to rub the monster on your face. You're doing it now. You're welcome. This is a nice segue, actually, not the face rubbing thing, but rather this skin respiration, to the other structures located on the back of the Cherubble. This is called a cerus, or serrata as a plural form. They also help with respiration, maximizing the surface area the organism can breathe from. They are most commonly seen on nudibranchs. One notable feature is that in many species of nudibranchs, serrata can excrete a sticky mucus. In our case, it's probably the same slime that helps the Cherubble breathe. This explains the strings running from the two largest serrata to the back of the mythical. They are actually long, dried up strands of mucus, produced by the upper end of the serrata and gravity dripped down to the back. The cool part about this system is that the Cherubble is able to tune its own strings by secreting more slime. That thickens the strings and therefore lowers the pitch. I think that's a really cool system, but also sort of gross. Cool, so now we can get back into theorizing about dreams. The bio explains the growths on the tail of the Cherubble as physical byproducts of manifested dreams. Because it explicitly says physical, it gives more credibility to my theory of the dreams projected from the mind of the Cherubble are completely imaginary and experienced as hallucinations. The colorful buildup on its tail is a residue that is produced from specialized glands. Sort of like sweat glands, they ooze out leftover dream chemicals that aren't wafted out of the rhinophores. Any excess material is built up on the tail so it can easily fall off when the Cherubble moves around. It could also be on the tail because it's furthest from the gills and the face. I guess that means that once the Cherubble projects its dreams through its rhinophores, the rest of that specific dream chemical is considered waste material and ejected from the body as what is essentially crystallized dreams. I have the opportunity to name such a unique compound because I don't think the material has ever been canonically called anything. So, it's currently dubbed somnium because it's Latin for dream and it also sounds like a mineral. Let me know your names in the comments and I might change my preference. At any rate, we've talked about the chemical composition of this dream compound before. Its molecules are somehow organized to reflect the neural activity at the time the Cherubble produced it. That means that the crystal lattice and the color are subject to change depending on the composition of the dream. For example, we can see the Cherubble having 3 subtypes of somnium on its tail, probably just dubbed amber, crimson, and rose somnium. Perhaps crimson somnium represents dreams with feelings of love, rose somnium means joyful dreams, and amber somnium is a product of creative or perhaps adventurous dreams. I would imagine that as a crystallized dream, you'd be able to ingest it. You would probably get knocked out and experience the dream very vividly yourself, as the concentration is much higher than an airborne pheromone. Creating literal crystallized dreams would have to take quite an energy toll on the Cherubble, which would explain why it's always asleep. However, it creates a cycle of sleeping to regain energy from creating dreams, and then creating more dreams because the mythical is sleeping. I believe this is why the blubberflies play music for the Cherubble. It's in order for it to focus and try to recharge. When there's no harp music to keep the monster soothed, it wakes up from restlessness and the island's activity, interrupting its slumber. A lot of real-world sea slugs have a low metabolism, which would also explain why Cherubble needs so much rest. At last we can get to the blubberflies, the small organisms that exist in a symbiotic relationship with the larger mythical. Like the Cherubble, they possess gills and slimy skin to breathe both in air and in water. Additionally, their pectoral fins are adapted to propel them through liquid and gas matrices. Their skeleton follows the same general shape of a seahorse, lots of bony plates that provide protection. They'd have to coordinate with each other in order to play so fluidly, so in the real world, seahorses communicate through eye contact and tail movements. The real question, though, is why they hang around the Cherubble. The larger monster benefits because it's able to be lulled to sleep and regain some energy. But what do the blubberflies get in return? What's their motive? I think blubberflies are dream junkies. Just like how butterflies and hummingbirds need constant nectar to keep their energy levels up, I think it's the somnium that the blubberflies are after. And the way to get somnium is to keep the cherubble dreaming, which they excel at through their harp playing. So the more the cherubble sleeps, the more it dreams, and the more somnium it produces that the critters munch up. So that concludes my thoughts regarding the many features of the cherubble. Let's see the end result. Oh, can you cut that out? I didn't even start on the segment yet. I don't even like Dream. When it comes to creating a rare version of cherubble, I think the easiest solution is to reverse its theming. How about, instead of restfully sleeping, the cherubble suffers from either insomnia or nightmares, and its design could reflect that. Perhaps the somnium on its tail would reflect the bad dreams it receives while asleep. The epic is pretty much up in the air. Perhaps it could serve as an inspiration for the Wubbox due to its resemblance to an astropod, but that's basically all I got regarding Epic Cherubble, and that sums up today's episode. I do hope that you enjoyed this next installment of Monster Biology, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one. You have been watching the Cryptanium channel, and I will see you all later.